There comes a moment in every life where we wake up, not in the physical sense, but in the deeper one. The awakening isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It's quiet, like the whisper of a new thought, a different feeling, a question. Is this all there is? That's where rewiring the mind begins, not in action, but in awareness. You see, the mind is not the master, it is a tool, and most people live as prisoners to their thoughts, recycled emotions, and the stories they tell themselves every day. They think they are their mind, but you are not the storm, you are the sky behind it. The patterns you carry, fear, doubt, procrastination, anger, self-sabotage, these are not who you are. These are who you practiced being, but in the middle of his success he broke. Depression, emptiness, a void success couldn't fill. He said, I wish everyone could become rich and famous and get everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. And from that place he rewired. He dove into consciousness, into presence. He let go of the ego and started living from a deeper space, not needing to be someone, just being. That is the beginning of a rewired mind. Rewiring is not about force. It's not about shouting affirmations into a mirror while your soul is crumbling. It is about stillness. It is about awareness. When you watch your thoughts like clouds floating through a vast sky, without judgment, you start to dissolve the grip they have on you, and in that space, change happens. There was a man I once met who had spent 10 years in prison, 10 years locked in a cage, and yet he told me they had never felt freer, because inside that prison, stripped of distractions and noise, he found a book. A single book, The Power of Now, and through that he discovered presence. He said, they locked up my body, but I found my mind, and it was the first time I had ever been free. The world wants you to believe that change is hard, that transformation is a mountain only the strong can climb. But here's the truth, transformation happens in an instant. The moment you decide to become aware, the second you stop identifying with every fear that knocks on your door and say, no, that's not me anymore. Your past is not a prophecy, it's a pattern. And patterns can be broken the moment you become present enough to see them. Rewiring your mind is not about fixing yourself. You were never broken. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Before the fear, before the comparison, before the noise. When a child learns to walk, they fall 100 times, but they don't say, maybe walking isn't for me. They get up again and again, not because they're strong, but because they don't yet carry the weight of doubt. That's how natural rewiring is. You already know how, you just forgot. When the mind is still, the false self dies, and in its place rises something more true, more grounded, more powerful than anything the ego could ever fabricate, your presence. So right here in this very moment, ask yourself, what thought am I believing that is holding me back from the life I was born to live? And when you find it, don't fight it, just see it. Because awareness is the beginning of freedom. Everything you want is already here. It's not in the future, it's not out there, It's within you, waiting for you to remember, and the moment you do, the rewiring begins. Awareness is not something you acquire, it is something you remember. It's the original state of your being, the quiet space that was always there before the noise of thought came in. To begin the process of rewiring your mind, you must first become aware of the fact that your mind is running on autopilot, fueled by years of unconscious conditioning. Most people live as if their thoughts are facts, as if every mental voice narrating their day is the truth. But the moment you begin to observe the thought, you are no longer inside it, you are outside, watching. And that single shift in perception is where all true change begins. We've been conditioned to believe that transformation requires force, some kind of external effort, drastic action, or overnight epiphany. But all of that is surface level. Rewiring doesn't begin in the external world. It begins in the stillness of the internal one. When you start watching your mind, really watching, you notice how many of your thoughts aren't even yours. They come from your parents, your teachers, society, past wound survival mechanisms. These recycled thoughts keep looping, creating the same emotions, and those emotions create the same behaviors. This is the loop, thought, feeling, reaction, again and again, like grooves in a record. The deeper the groove, the more automatic the behavior, and the longer you live unconsciously, the deeper those grooves get. But here's the miracle. The moment you see the loop, you are no longer just the loop. That's awareness, that split-second recognition. Oh, there's that thought again, is the birth of change. You don't have to fight the thought, fix it, or run from it. You just have to see it. Think of it like shining a flashlight in a dark room. The darkness doesn't resist, it disappears. In the same way, your awareness begins to dissolve the grip your mind has had on you for years. This is not about becoming thoughtless. It's about no longer being held hostage by every passing thought. It's about seeing your inner world with clarity instead of distortion. When you notice that your mind is spiraling into fear or shame or self-doubt, and instead of reacting, you pause and observe, that's where the rewiring begins. Not because you tried to be positive, but because you chose to be present. The presence itself is the healing force. There's no rush in this process. It's not a race to fix yourself. You are never broken. But your awareness got buried under years of mental noise, and now, gently through stillness and observation, you begin to uncover it again. Rewiring your mind isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you truly are, beyond thought, beyond fear, beyond story. And it all begins the moment you become aware you are not your thoughts. This may sound simple, but it is the foundation of true inner freedom. From the moment we become conscious as children, we begin to attach ourselves to the thoughts that arise in our minds. These thoughts become beliefs, and those beliefs start to define who we think we are. We take ownership of every idea, judgment, worry, and emotion, as if they are woven into the fabric of our identity. But the truth is far more liberating. Your thoughts are not who you are. They are patterns of energy. They come and go like clouds moving through the sky. And you, your essence, your awareness, are the sky itself. Most people live their entire lives trapped inside their minds, reacting not to the world as it is, but to the mental commentary playing in their heads. This inner voice narrates every moment, drawing from the past and projecting into the future, telling you who you should be, what you should fear, and why you're not enough. It is relentless, and yet there is a deeper part of you that can observe this voice. That part is not the thinker, it is the witness, the presence. And that presence is your true self. To rewire your mind, you must begin by recognizing the difference between the thinker and the observer. When you identify with every thought that arises, you are trapped in the ego's illusion. But when you step back and see the thought for what it is, a fleeting mental event, you begin to reclaim your power. In that moment, you are no longer reacting from the conditioning of the past. You are choosing your response from a place of clarity. Real-life transformation often begins in this simple but profound recognition. Consider someone who has struggled with anxiety their entire life. The mind tells them stories constantly. Something is going to go wrong. You can't handle this. You're not safe. These thoughts trigger a physical reaction, a racing heart, tight chest, shallow breath. But one day they pause. They notice the thought instead of diving into it. There's that thought again. They breathe into the present moment and allow the feeling to exist without judgment. In that space, the power of the thought weakens. It no longer defines them. That single moment of awareness is the beginning of freedom. The mind is a powerful servant, but a dangerous master. When you mistake yourself for your thoughts, you live in a cage built by invisible bars. But when you realize you are the awareness behind the thoughts, the cage disappears. You begin to live with intention rather than reaction. You begin to choose peace over panic, truth over fear, presence over projection. And this shift, subtle but profound, is what allows the old mental wiring to dissolve. You do not need to control every thought to be free. You simply need to stop believing that every thought is true. When you see them clearly, they lose their grip. And in that space of stillness, your true self begins to rise. Pain has a strange way of opening doors we didn't even know existed. At first glance, it seems like an enemy, something to avoid, something to numb, escape, or suppress. But for many, pain becomes the very thing that wakes them up. It strips away the surface layers of life, the distractions, the ego, the masks we wear, and leaves us raw, exposed, and face to face with what's real. That moment, as uncomfortable as it is, holds a quiet kind of power, because inside that pain is a message, a call, an invitation to awaken. There's a reason why some of the most spiritually aware people in the world have first walked through deep suffering. Pain humbles the mind. It softens the heart. It makes you question everything you thought you knew. The identity that once seemed so solid, your job title, your social image, your achievements, your plans, suddenly feels paper thin when life shakes you. And that's when a deeper voice begins to speak, not the voice of the ego, but the voice of awareness. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it whisper, "There's more to you than this." Look at Jim Carrey, not as the comedian, but as a man. At the height of fame, he had everything the world tells us we should want: money, recognition, influence. And yet, he fell into a deep depression. In that space of emptiness, he realized something crucial, that the self he had built, the persona that brought him applause and laughter, wasn't real. It was a role. He began to speak publicly about awakening, about the illusion of identity, about the freedom that comes when you stop living from the surface and start living from the stillness within. His pain didn't break him, it broke the illusion, and that allowed something more authentic to emerge. So often we label pain as failure, when in fact it's a transition. A breakdown is often a breakthrough in disguise. You lose a relationship, and in the loneliness you rediscover your own voice. You fail at something you thought you couldn't live without, and in that space of defeat, you find the courage to try something new, something real. Pain forces us to stop moving so fast, to stop hiding behind busy schedules, filtered photos, and polite conversations. It pulls us into the present, into the body, into the breath. It says, look, be here, feel this. And if you have the courage to stay with it, to breathe through it rather than run from it, you begin to change. Pain is not the end, it's a teacher. And if you let it, it will guide you into a deeper awareness than comfort ever could. It's in the silence after the breakdown, the emptiness after the loss, where the mind becomes still enough for the truth to rise. That's the moment where the rewiring begins, when you're no longer driven by the fear of pain, but shaped by the wisdom it left behind. The present moment is the doorway through which all transformation enters, not the past, which is already gone, nor the future, which is only a concept in your mind. Real power, real freedom, and real change can only happen here now. And yet, most people live as if the present is merely a stepping stone, a means to an end. They rush through it, dismiss it, or try to escape it, always looking ahead or behind, never realizing that everything they are searching for already exists in this one breath, this one moment, right here. Rewiring the mind is not about endlessly chasing goals or trying to fix yourself in the future. It is about returning to the place where all creation begins, the now. When you become fully present, even for a few seconds, something shifts. The noise of the mind softens. The tension in your body starts to ease. The stories you've been telling yourself, the ones about who you are, what you lack, what might go wrong, begin to lose their grip. In the silence that follows, you start to feel who you are beneath the thought, beneath the identity, beneath the pressure. Think of how often your mind drags you into places that don't serve you. It replays that one mistake from years ago as if reliving it will change the outcome. It projects anxiety into the future, convincing you that something bad is just around the corner. But when you bring your attention back to now, your breath, the weight of your body in the chair, the sounds around you, you realize none of those mental fears exist here. In the present, there is no judgment, no shame, no regret, only being. Many people believe that the future holds the key to their happiness, their purpose, their breakthrough. But the truth is, the future is just a mental projection of now. The quality of your future depends entirely on the quality of your presence in this moment. If you want a peaceful, powerful, intentional life, it starts by bringing peace, power, and intention into this breath. That's how rewiring happens, not through distant plans, but through moment-to-moment awareness. There's a quiet strength in the present that the ego doesn't understand. The ego wants drama, movement, validation, but the present doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. And when you surrender to it fully, even for a second, you meet a version of yourself that is whole, not lacking, not broken, just aware. This is the space where healing begins, not through mental analysis, but through presence. When you are fully here, your nervous system calms. Your decisions become clearer, your reactions soften into responses. And without even trying, the old wiring, the programming of fear, overthinking, and self-doubt begins to dissolve, because the mind cannot survive in the presence of the now. It loses its control, and what remains is something more true, more grounded, more you than anything the mind could ever imagine. The mind is a creature of habit. It builds patterns like rivers carve valleys, slowly, steadily, and deeply over time. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you revisit, every story you tell yourself over and over again. These become grooves in the brain, neural pathways that feel familiar and automatic. That is what creates your internal wiring. And the mistake most people make is believing that these patterns are permanent. They're not. They're practiced, and what has been practiced can be unpracticed. The mind can be rewired. But first you must realize that fear, procrastination, self-sabotage, these are not flaws in your character, they are habits of the mind. Many people walk through life believing that their struggles are part of their identity. I've always been anxious, I'm just not disciplined, I'm bad at relationships. These statements feel true because they've been repeated. But repetition is not truth. It's just momentum. The truth is your brain is plastic. Science calls it neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reshape itself based on what you focus on, what you think about, and what you do consistently. This means your patterns are not set in stone. They are flexible, malleable, and they can be changed by intention and presence. Imagine someone who has lived with low self-worth for years. Their inner dialogue is filled with phrases like, "I'm not good enough," or "Why would anyone choose me?" Every time these thoughts appear and are believed, they reinforce the pattern. But the moment this person starts to notice the thought without judgment, just awareness, something begins to change. They might catch themselves thinking it and pause. There it is again, the old pattern. That single moment of recognition creates a gap. And in that gap is power, the power to choose something different, the power to not react, but to observe, the power to plant a new thought like, what if that's not true anymore? Patterns lose their grip when they are no longer running in the background. When you bring them to the light of awareness, you interrupt the cycle. And with repeated presence, the old wiring begins to weaken. You don't need to destroy it, you simply stop feeding it. Each time you choose a new response, a deep breath instead of a panic spiral, a kind word instead of self-criticism, you're carving a new groove, a new neural pathway, and the more you practice the new, the more the old dissolves. This isn't about becoming a new person overnight. It's about small shifts practiced often, rooted in awareness. And over time, you start to feel different. Not because you've forced yourself to change, but because you've stopped being who you were never meant to be. You let go of the automatic reactions, the survival strategies, the inherited beliefs, and what's left is someone real, someone grounded, someone who knows that the mind is not a cage, but a canvas, and you, fully awake, are holding the brush. Every single moment offers a choice, a chance to decide whether you will move from the unconscious patterns of the past or step into the awareness of the present. Most people don't realize how many of their daily decisions are not really decisions at all. They're reactions, habits, echoes of old stories. Something happens, and the mind immediately responds with its usual programming: fear, defensiveness, avoidance, overthinking. And because it happens so quickly, we believe we had no choice. But there's always a choice. And freedom begins the moment you become conscious of it. This choice isn't loud, it doesn't shout. It lives in the space between stimulus and response, in the breath you take before you speak, in the pause before you act. In that tiny space, so easy to miss, is your power, the power to respond instead of react, the power to choose a new path rather than replay the old one. And when you start living from that space, something fundamental begins to shift. Your life is no longer dictated by your past, but shaped by your present awareness. Imagine someone who has always been quick to anger. Maybe they grew up in an environment where anger was the only way to feel powerful or heard. That pattern gets wired in early. Years go by, and they find themselves snapping in traffic, in conversations, in relationships, always justifying it, always saying that's just how I am. But one day, something changes. They notice the rising heat, the tight chest, the urge to lash out, and they pause, they breathe, they don't act. In that small, quiet moment, they've done something radical. They've chosen consciousness over conditioning, and even though the anger is still there, it no longer owns them. This is how rewiring begins, not with grand declarations, but with gentle awareness, practiced over and over again. You don't have to erase your past to create a new future. You just have to stop letting it run the show. Every time you choose presence over the old program, the neural path of that habit weakens. And every time you respond with clarity, with love, with patience, that new path gets stronger. You're not just thinking differently, you're becoming different. Conscious choice is not about being perfect. You will still react sometimes. The old patterns may show up. But the difference is, now you see them, and seeing is everything. Because you can't change what you don't see, but once you do see it, it can no longer run you in the same way. That's the doorway to freedom, not in controlling life, but in how you meet life, moment by moment, breath by breath. You are not here to be a slave to your past programming. You are here to wake up, to step into the role of the chooser, the creator, and in that quiet, sacred role, you reclaim something most people have forgotten they even had: the power to shape your life from the inside out. Stillness is not the absence of action, it is the presence of depth. In a world that praises hustle, noise, and speed, we are taught to equate power with how hard we push. We're told that if we just try harder, work longer, grind more relentlessly, we will get the life we want. But real inner change doesn't respond to force. The deeper rewiring of the mind doesn't happen through intensity. It happens through stillness, because stillness is where the truth lives. Beneath the mental chatter, beneath the striving, beneath the constant reaching for something more. Most people fear stillness because it confronts them with what they've been running from. The thoughts they avoid, the pain they suppress, the emptiness they try to fill with distraction. All of it begins to rise when you stop moving. But this is not something to fear, it is something to welcome. Because when you stop and become still, you start to hear the real conversation that has been happening inside of you all along. And that conversation is the doorway to healing. Think of a muddy pond. If you keep stirring it, it stays cloudy. But when you let it rest, the dirt begins to settle and the water clears. The same is true for the mind. When you keep thinking, analyzing, and problem solving, you stay entangled in confusion. But when you sit quietly and just be, clarity emerges on its own. The mind begins to slow, the noise fades, and a deeper intelligence comes forward, one that is not of the mind, but of awareness. There's a reason people experience profound insight in moments of silence. It's not because they forced their way into enlightenment. It's because in stillness, the mental mechanisms that normally dominate their experience loosen their grip. That's where wisdom lives, not in striving, but in surrender, not in noise, but in presence. Consider someone facing a difficult life decision. Their mind is spinning with pros and cons, fears and projections. They try to figure it out, but the more they think, the more confused they become. Then, finally, they stop trying, they sit in silence, they go for a walk without their phone, they breathe, and slowly a quiet knowing begins to rise. Not a loud answer, but a gentle inner clarity that says, this is the way. That clarity was always there. It just needed the mind to get out of the way. Stillness is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's not doing nothing. It's doing the most powerful thing you can do. Listening. Listening to what's beneath the noise, listening to the intelligence of your body, your intuition, your soul. And from that place, your actions become aligned, not rushed, not reactive, but intentional and deeply rooted. The ego may try to convince you that silence is a waste of time, but the soul knows better. Stillness is where the mind is rewired, not through force, but through awareness. It is where healing is not achieved, but allowed. And it is in that quiet, sacred space that the most profound transformation begins, not with a bang, but with a breath. Your environment is not just a backdrop to your life. It is a mirror, a teacher, and often a silent architect of your thoughts. The people you surround yourself with, the spaces you inhabit, the words you listen to, the energy you consume, all of it is shaping your mind whether you are aware of it or not. Just as a plant cannot thrive in poor soil, You cannot grow into the highest version of yourself in an environment that poisons your spirit. Rewiring your mind doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when you consciously begin to choose what and who you allow into your mental and emotional space. Every conversation you have, every social media post you scroll through, every room you walk into is either reinforcing your old identity or calling forth a new one. If you are constantly surrounded by negativity, gossip, fear-based thinking, or small-mindedness, it seeps into you. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Energy is contagious, and if you don't protect your space, your mind becomes a reflection of everything around you. That's not judgment, it's awareness. And from awareness you can begin to make new choices. Consider someone who's trying to shift their mindset to become more conscious, more empowered, more peaceful. But every day they wake up, turn on the news filled with fear, scroll through social media laced with comparison and outrage, talk to people who don't believe in growth or healing. It's like trying to meditate in a thunderstorm. The environment is not aligned with the intention, and eventually that misalignment creates resistance, confusion, and exhaustion. Now imagine the same person choosing differently. They start their day in silence. They listen to voices that inspire truth, not fear. They spend time with people who don't just tolerate their growth, but reflect it. They remove themselves from spaces that drain them, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for their own energy. Slowly, without even realizing it, their inner world begins to shift. Their thoughts become clearer, their beliefs become lighter, their identity begins to rise. You do not owe anyone access to your energy simply because they've always had it. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors, and you get to choose who walks through. This isn't about cutting people off from a place of anger. It's about creating space from a place of love. Love for your own evolution, because you cannot rewire your mind in the same environment that wired it in the first place. Something has to change. Sometimes that change is external. More often it begins internally, with the courage to say, this no longer supports who I am becoming. When you surround yourself with alignment, elevation becomes natural. You stop struggling to think differently because your environment speaks the new language fluently. And the more you stay in that field, the more your mind adapts to match it. Growth is not just a solo act, it's a symphony, and the environment you choose is the music playing in the background of your transformation. Make sure it's in harmony with who you truly are. Rewiring the mind is not an overnight process, nor is it a battle to be fought with brute force. It is a quiet, intentional journey that begins with awareness, with a recognition that you are not your thoughts, your pain, or your past. It is about choosing presence over distraction, response over reaction, and stillness over noise. As you become more aware of the unconscious patterns that have shaped your life, you begin to reclaim your power. Each choice you make to step into the present moment, to see your thoughts without judgment, and to create a supportive environment around you, brings you one step closer to the person you are meant to be. Your mind is not fixed. It is not defined by what has come before. With each new moment of awareness, you have the ability to reshape your mental and emotional wiring Your environment, your relationships, and even your sense of self can all be transformed, not by force, but by consistent, gentle shifts toward greater consciousness. By learning to live from a place of awareness rather than automatic reaction, you not only begin to change your mind, but you change the way you experience life itself. This is the power you hold, the power to choose, to transform, to rise above the old patterns, and to create a new reality. The rewiring process is not about becoming someone different, but about peeling back the layers of illusion and returning to the essence of who you truly are. The present moment, the quiet pause between thought and action, holds all the answers you need. And when you start living from that place of deep awareness, you will realize that you've always had the power to change. All it takes is the courage to begin.